You know, I learned how to read sitting on my father's lap many years ago with the Sunday comics. And I've had a love affair with newspapers ever since. But I'm kind of worried right now because newspapers are under the gun. Lots of things are changing. And the newspapers that are surviving are the ones that are evolving. They're the ones that realize that they're media companies. And that what really matters is the news, the photos, the analysis that they provide, not the physical product. So we've got things like our virtual newspaper that really is a replica of the print newspaper. We've got our website. Our reporters have turned into multitaskers. They can take pictures, do video, blog, tweet, you name it, they can do it all. We've expanded our website. We've added things like the photo blogs and the videography. We have all kinds of reporters, political reporters and sports reporters that blog. We get lots of reader comments and interactions. We've developed a lot of niche publications, and a lot of people think that may be the future of the newspaper industry. We have publications for the ski industry, for gambling, for pets, lots of different products. And we also have expanded into community journalism, where people, the readers, can actually post stories and have the opportunity to have them printed in the newspaper. But with all of these changes, even that's not enough. We've got people like Jeremy, for whom waiting for a web page to load takes 4 seconds, and that's too long. So we've gone to Facebook, we've gone to Twitter, we've got all kinds of mobile applications. And the other challenges we have multiplied. A new product came out, or is coming out right now, The Daily, which is a publication only for the iPad. Brand new publication, won't be in print. It's a national publication. So this may be one of the answers to what's going to happen to newspapers in the future. And then the other challenge is, how are we going to pay for it all? The pay model that worked really well for the print newspaper hasn't translated online. We can't get people to pay. They did a recent survey, and 86% of the people that they surveyed said that they would be willing to watch ads on their iPad in order to get free content. But then 78% turned around and said that having to watch advertising took away from their enjoyment of their iPad. So I don't know where we're going. But I've got some other concerns just beyond these challenges, because I think eventually newspapers are going to address them. But there are some things that I hope don't get left in that transition. One of them is civic engagement. You know, this is an old Thomas Jefferson quote: "Were it left for me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter." And as this Thomas Jefferson says, but America seems to be getting the former, because more and more newspapers have gone out of business in the last few years, including the Rocky Mountain News. That was a sad day. But interaction with news as a teen is an important indicator of future civic engagement. In looking at adults who volunteer, donate, and vote, research has shown that there is a marked difference in participation if they interacted with news as teens. Adults, non-readers feel a low civic duty to keep informed. Now, I'm not as worried about this as I was before I started this presentation, because I've heard some really exciting things today. But I'm hoping students don't turn out like this young lady who's asking her mom for help on writing a current event report. You know, she wants to do a good job, so we should make it extra current and super eventy. Let's not skimp on that either. And her mom looks at her and says, "You don't know what a current event is, do you?" "Well, do you think that'll make a difference in my grade?" But research has shown that the most significant factors in predicting future civic involvement were discussing current events with parents and other teens, and having classroom discussions and homework assignments around current events. So if we want our participatory government, our democracy to work, we've got to make sure that students are engaged with current events. Another thing I worry about is maintaining our historic record. We talked about the Library of Congress having historic newspaper pages. There's a great book out that was published recently with front pages of the Rocky Mountain News really showing the last 150 years. There was a great article in the paper last Sunday about a historian in Greeley, Peggy Waldo, who's searching Greeley's newspaper archives. Apparently, Sayyid Qutb, who was head of the Muslim Brotherhood and really spouted a lot of hatred toward the United States, spent the summer in Greeley in 1949. And that was when he really developed his hatred of America. So she's scouring the newspaper archives. She's looking at news stories. She's looking at feature stories, things about the Garden Club and movies that were being advertised at the time, looking at the lingerie ads. She's really trying to get a snapshot of Greeley to understand what happened that summer that really perhaps changed the course of events in the United States. And I worry that if we're not careful, we're going to lose some of that historic record. 60 years from now, what are historians going to be able to look at beyond websites to really get that snapshot of our world? The other thing I worry about is serendipity. I don't know how many of you have ever been thumbing through the newspaper headed to find out the latest sports scores or to read about a city council meeting, and as you're turning those pages, all of a sudden an article popped out at you. Something you didn't know wanted to know anything about, but which really became an important article, gave you that wonderful piece of information that you didn't even know you needed. And that serendipity, I think, is a really nice thing that happens. And sometimes with searches, students narrow down too much, and they lose that ability to discover those treasures along the way. Another thing I worry about is increased polarization. Those op-ed pages are important. The op-ed pages are the pages that are opposite the editorial page. So you've got the official newspaper stance on one side, and then you've got this whole range of columns and letters to the editor and political cartoons that present other points of view on the other page. But what happens when you can put together an RSS feed or create a homepage like iGoogle is you decide what you want to have appear on your homepage. And I worry that people are only going to have information presented to them that reinforce the opinions they already hold. You're going to be like this gentleman. I don't know if you can read this. He has people who agree with me on one side of his newspaper and idiots on the other. I think it's valuable to have other perspectives, if for nothing else than to bounce your point of view off that idea and to strengthen it or possibly give you another viewpoint. So I hope that polarization doesn't increase because of the way we start to get our news. And as much as I love blogs and community journalism and all of those things, I think we're going to be in a bad way if that's all that's left. If Peggy's Poodles and Politics podcast and Government Sucks blog and Tiffany's Facebook pages are all that we have left, because what we're going to lose is editorial oversight. We're going to lose that person that says, get another source, run those numbers again, check your information, because that editorial oversight is valuable. And I worry that students are being overwhelmed with a lot of information of questionable validity. Anybody can post anything to the internet. And I think that as teachers, those research skills, the critical thinking, evaluating websites, all of those things that you're teaching are becoming more and more valuable. Another thing that has happened as newspaper budgets have declined and revenues have decreased, we can't afford investigative journalism as much as we used to. And that's another huge thing. The last century had amazing numbers of journalists that really made changes in the United States. Ida Tarbell took on Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Upton Sinclair took on the meatpacking industry. I didn't even realize it until I was reading this book, but the U.S. Senate, the senators used to be appointed by the state legislature. And there was all kinds of concern about corporations buying Senate votes. Does this sound like possibly anything that might still be going on? And so the 17th Amendment came about as a result of a series of investigative articles about these practices, and it changed it so that now senators are elected by popular vote. Nixon was basically removed from office as a result of a lot of investigative journalism. We're running a serial story right now, Muckrakers, about these investigative reporters of the last century. And I really hate to think that some of those future watchdogs might be in jeopardy because of the loss of newspaper revenues. I think this is a great quote from Thomas Patterson, a professor of government and the press at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government. It's hard to pick up a newspaper and ignore that there is a front page. But with the internet, it's easy to play games or conduct a search without seeing news. On the internet, you have to make a deliberate choice to go somewhere, and we are finding that young people are not making an appointment with news. Entertainment, sports, celebrities, soft news, they love those things, but not the news. Compare that with what's happening in Egypt right now. We heard that exciting news about Mubarak, but also that's a revolution of young people. And those young people are hungry for the news. All of the news broadcasts I hear talk about how they've been following the news. And when the government shut down the airwaves and they could no longer use the social media, the print newspaper became even more important. And you'll notice that a lot of the journalists are being targeted in Egypt. So I think that also points out the important role that they can play. So, do I have answers to these questions? I'm working on it. I hear from a lot of you that you're working on it as well, and I think the more minds we can get involved, the better answers we're going to be able to come up with. So, thank you.